It's, my name is Dennis DuPuis. I live in North Augusta. My father was in the military, so we moved around to quite a few places. We lived in Japan and France and Hawaii and Ohio. And when I was 1965, when I was a rising junior, we came to Augusta, and I've lived in the Augusta area, except for my military service, ever since. I served in Vietnam from August 1969 to August of 70. I came home, was stationed at Savannah, Georgia for a year, and then I went back for a second tour from August of 71 to January of 72. I flew helicopters. I flew Hueys the first tour and Cobras the second tour. I was in the Army.
My father was in World War II, and my father-in-law was in World War II and Korea. He's 93 now, still lives with us. Lived with us for the last 10 years. But I was in from 64 to 71, as I said. Did 4 tours over there as a cryogenics technician, taking liquid oxygen, liquid nitrogen to the rocket consumption.
I enlisted.
I enlisted also. Well, my father told me it was either college or the service, but either way, I'm out the door. So I didn't know what I wanted to do at the time, so I chose the service. And the service is where I got my education. Went through machinist mate school, submarine school, nuclear power school, and cryogenics, which afterwards gave me the career that I had. I ended up as the master plan coordinator and launch pad operations manager on the space shuttle program from 83 to 86.
My father was in the service. Like a lot of fellows of his generation, I had a lot of uncles that served during World War II. Dad stayed in and served during Korea, and he also served in Vietnam. He was in Vietnam when I graduated from high school. He came home, and about 6 weeks later, my brother, who was in the infantry, went to Vietnam. I'd always wanted to fly. I really wanted to fly airplanes, but as without a college degree, the only service that would send me to flight school was the Army. My inspiration for that was I had a cousin that flew with the Flying Tigers. And when I was growing up, my dad used to tell me stories about his cousins who all flew during World War II. He had one that flew in the Navy and 2 that flew for the Army Air Corps. And gosh, he was so, you could see it in his eyes, he was so proud when Dad talked about his cousins that flew and everything that I wanted my dad to be that proud of me. So, my brother, like I say, my brother was in the infantry, and I really didn't care to walk. I wasn't a walker or a hiker. I couldn't imagine spending nights in the woods, and so flying fit me well for what I wanted to do.
There was no welcome home ceremony. There was people spitting on you, calling you baby killers. I remember signs in Norfolk, sailors and dogs stay off the grass.
So you came home to Norfolk when you came home?
No, that was just one of the stations that I had. Interesting enough, when you're talking about flying, when I was in boot camp in San Diego, I wanted to fly. I wanted to go to NAVCAT.
Yeah.
And there was 2 of us that they cut out and had us take the entrance exams for NAVCAT, which I passed, which I figured I'm going to NAVCAT. They come back to me and says, well, you got to reapply in about 2 years. Why? Well, you're only 17. You got to be 19 to enter NAVCAT. So that was, of course, then I ended up on the space shuttle program. So
when you came home, did you come home on a ship or with a group of?
No, I came home on it. Well, when I got out, no, they flew me off. I was on a heavy cruiser, flagship, USS Chicago, 7th Fleet, and they flew me off of that to Da Nang, and then up to Japan, over to Alaska, back down to California. So I actually mustered out in San Francisco.
Did they recommend you wear your uniform home, or did they tell you anything about getting dressed up and changing the civilian clothes?
No, there was no mention of that.
Did they say that to you?
I came home, I had 2 tours, but I came home 3 times. And I went as an individual. My dad went as, my brother and sister-in-law, we all went as individuals. We didn't, it was unlike today when most people deploy. They go as a unit. You know, there might be 200 or 300, a large amount of people, and they leave at the same time. They come home to the same base, back to families, and most of us were single. But when I came home, my family knew I was coming home. But other than that, you know, I came home as an individual. So the welcome home that I got was similar to my dad and my brother. They came out the airport and got me and went home, and there was a little celebration about me being home at the house, and perhaps 1 or 2 of the neighbors and close high school friends came, but other than that, nobody really even, I don't think a lot of people even realized I was gone. In the 30 days leave that I had the first time, I saw some of the folks I'd gone to high school, graduated from high school with 3 years before that, and you know, they'd say, well, where you been, Dennis? I haven't seen you in a while. And I says, I haven't seen you in a couple of months. I said, no, you haven't seen me in a year. And no, I just saw you 3 or 4 months ago. Their concept of time in relationship to everything that was going on, well, I guess you could say we were invisible. The duty and the tour and being gone just wasn't visible. So the welcome home that I received was from my family. Now, my mother was extremely happy to see me home because she'd sent Dad to World War II for 3.5 years in Korea, and Dad had a year in Vietnam, and my brother had a year in Vietnam, and I had a year and then another 6 months. So I really need to mention my mom, who, and families, and in particular, that from every calendar year from 1967 until 1972, my mother either had a son or a husband in Vietnam. I can't imagine what that was like for him. My son-in-law had spent a year in Afghanistan and a year in Iraq, and I worried about him. You know, he was my son-in-law. I can't imagine what my mother went through in those 5 or 6 years.
My friends from high school and stuff like that, I couldn't hardly stand to be around them. They were like they were still in high school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were like decades apart as far as mentally where we were. And after that first time back, I started coming back to Oakland, California, which is where I was actually raised, in Oakland. But yeah, it was a lot different. I don't know, going over, the maturity level was boosted, you might say. I found it hard coming back. Of course, over there, you pull R&R and you go out to different places. Went all over Asia, Japan, Philippines, Singapore. It was just, you were king over there. You come back to the States and you were dirt. People just didn't like you.
Similarly, when I came home and got out, I went back to college, and at Augusta College, and it seemed like it was the 5th year of high school. You know, it didn't the maturity level wasn't there. It was I was the one that changed, but yeah, it was like I was going back to the 5th year of high school when I went to Augusta College.
It goes back to the education that I got in the service with all those schools. They were all basically engineering type schools, and I didn't go back to college, or I didn't go to college basically, but I hired in with Lockheed at the Burbank Airport in California, and as a maintenance mechanic. 2 years later, because of an incident where there was an accident, I engineered something to fix it, blah, blah, blah. But they asked me what I wanted to do. I said, I wanted to be a manufacturing engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And I skipped college. They sent me to graduate school at UCLA for manufacturing engineering. And that's how I got up onto the space shuttle program. I went from Levi's, long hair below my shoulders, and a knife on my hip, riding a chopper to school, to a 3-piece suit over a weekend.
Wow.
So it was good, but it was the schools in the military that helped me do all that.
My experience coming home and going to work and finding a job was completely different. I like to say that each veteran's experience in the military and the readjustment coming home is unique. So many people try to put us all in the same box, that this is a Vietnam veteran or this is a veteran and this is what happens to all of them. But my experiences in Vietnam were quite a bit different than Doug's, and likewise when I came home it was quite a bit different. I got out in 72, and it wasn't until 1977 that I really got a good job. I would go places and apply for a job, and about the second page on most job applications were military service, and were you in Vietnam? And a lot of times when the person doing the interview would get to that part, they'd just close it up and say, we don't have anything for you. There was at 1972, there was a stigmatism attached to my record by being a Vietnam veteran. Now, this isn't sour grapes or feel sorry for me or anything, but that's just my experience, and it's shared by a lot of other veterans. And finally, the local union here in town, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, when I applied to them, it was kind of the same thing. I went before the board, and there was 6 guys up there. When they opened up the application to read the second side, the head superintendent read, oh, you're a Vietnam veteran. I said, yes, I am. And he goes, it says here you flew helicopters. And I said, yes, I did. And I thought that was going to be the end of it. And he says, well, tell me why you want to be in the electrical industry when you have a license to fly a helicopter. And I thought a little bit, and it just came to me. I asked him, I says, do you have a driver's license? And he goes, yes, I do. And I said, why don't you drive a taxi cab? For me, what I did in the service didn't relate to what I wanted to do when I got out. I wanted to have something at the end of the day that was tangible, that you could touch and feel. I worked for the post office a little bit, and gosh, you could work 8 hours and come back 2 shifts later, and it looked like the same sacks of mail, and everything was still the same. There wasn't, for me, there wasn't any tangible evidence that I'd ever been to work. So in the electrical trade, when you see the VA hospital here in Augusta, I helped build that. There's a lot of places in town where I can ride by with my grandchildren and say I was part of that. So if it hadn't been for the local union, I don't know how long it would have taken me to come back.